Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Neil Pickup here with you in the mother fluffing house. And for those of you tuned in to part number 1 with the main man, Ryan Espey, the Manitoba Mastiff, if you're in Arm Wars, the E-Train, where did the E-Train come from? Was that one of yours? Or did they just
no, it was a guy at work.
He said E-Train.
He started calling me that, yeah.
Lovely dance. So how many names have you had, Ryan, over your career?
Oh,
have you got
man.
any particular favourites?
What's that?
Have you got any particular favourites? If you were...
I'm kind of leaning back towards Manitoba Mastiff. I kind of didn't like it at first, and it's kind of grown on me over the years.
I think it's a good name, mate.
Yeah.
I like that. I like it.
Yeah.
I think it works for you. It does, Does your missus call you anything when you come home at night? She like...
No. Yeah. Nothing nice anyway. No,
I've got that. My missus is very similar. She'll come in. Yeah, little pet name she gives me. She's like, through the door. I'm like, all right, sweetheart. She's like, wanker. But, we've got a special relationship, Ryan. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the show. Ladies and gentlemen, this is part 2 of Deep Inside the Mind of Canadian superstar, super heavyweight, Ryan Espey. And we're going to go with the Manitoba Mastiff. So, if you tuned in to the first part of this, just to do a little bit of a recap, okay, like they do at the beginning of Sons of Anarchy. I'm going to go back a little bit, okay? We talked about, actually, I got educated upon the fact that Ryan was a significant competitor in strongman, and that strongman only really got cracking in Canada around the 90s, which is amazing to me. We also found out that Canada, with all its strength, legends, Louis Cyr, and so on, a lot of the time they seem to be a little bit late to the party on strength sports. And I want to pick up on that more in this episode, because the one exception to that might be arm wrestling. And we'll come to that, because obviously it was one of the founder, if not the founder member, of the W.A.F.
Yeah, John Miazdik.
We'll keep that boy boxed off, and we'll come back to it. Okay. The other thing that we covered off there was that Ryan competed in powerlifting, had a very, very significant and leaning towards the bench press, although he is in fact a top roller by choice as an arm wrestler. And last but by no means least, which we're going to come into now, because we didn't do as much on this, fight sports, Ryan. And that's where I wanted to start.
You want to start with fights?
MMA. Why MMA, mate? What brought that about? You're such a nice, gentle bloke.
I was always a fan, right? I was a hardcore fan for mixed martial arts right from the start. I was a fan of the early UFCs. I was a fan of Pride. I was a fan of Pancrase. Mm-hmm. And all of any form of kickboxing, all of that stuff. And I always thought that, if I ever had that opportunity. And then I owned a gym. And that in that gym, there was a friend of mine who had fought a few times, decided to start a club. And I ended up helping him train guys, training myself, cornering guys, and got to the point where it was time to give it a go. And I had you can find, ironically enough, if you go to my YouTube channel, you can find not only my first strongman competition, not only my first arm wrestling competition, but there's actually a video of my fight that I had in 2004. And that was before The Ultimate Fighter blew up the UFC, and actually it was right around the same time, because I remember that show starting. Mm-hmm. And I had signed a fight at an organization called Ultimate Cage Wars in Winnipeg. And 5,000 people, most of them from my hometown, came and bought tickets tableside. Some people wanted to see me win. Some people wanted to see me lose. And I fought a kickboxer who was... if you were making odds, you would have wanted to bet on me, put it that way. And the fight lasted a total of 16 seconds.
16 seconds?
16 seconds.
So you must have crack the guy then? You didn't take him down, I'm taking it, unless you're some kind of specialist on the ground.
Kept it standing, and uppercuts with my left kept him standing to the point where his corner threw in the towel immediately. Yeah. So it was my limited experience, and it was actually 14 days before my daughter was born. Mm-hmm. And I had called my wife, and I said, it's time. I called her back a few minutes, and I said, it's over. And she said, you're never doing that again.
Yeah,
I never.
Short career.
It was a very short career. I stayed training, stayed cornering guys, and, I had been offered a couple of fights. Wasn't met with much enthusiasm from the family. So my fight career was not very long, but I look back on it with fond memories and good experiences, and got to meet a lot of guys that are right at the top now. And had I stuck with that sport, because I was good, man. Like I felt like maybe looking back on it, my life would look significantly different. I might have a few less brain cells, mind you.
Yeah.
But that's how it goes.
Yeah, it's another sport that you're either in or you're not in. You got to. Yeah. I mean, we've had a number of guys that have crossed over and had a go at that. Most recently, Jake Smith's been obviously getting into the cage and doing his little bit. I think a number of people, if you look back at their career of fought, have been involved in myself in MMA and boxing, and various others throughout their career. Obviously, I think. Most famously from Canada, and a guy I wanted to just pick up on for a moment, would be Gary Goodrich. Did you cross Gary a great deal in your career, mate, over there? I'm taking it you've obviously been in proximity with him, because I'm sure that even when Gary wasn't arm wrestling, that he was around the game. Have you ever competed with Gary? Have you pulled with him?
I have never competed with him. I have met him a few times on a number of occasions. He's come out to events just to hang out. I've never actually been on a table with Gary. So Gary was kind of nearing the end of his arm wrestling career when I was starting, and we never crossed paths.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Gary was a guy that in my early career, my God, that man was strong. I mean, wow. The best of Goodrich was an awesome individual. So much. I mean, you talk about guys now that, in fact, recently an all-time greats list came out, and I can never look past Gary. So, when people make the claim who was the guy that on any given day may have been the guy, Gary was sort of a bit of an anomaly in some respects, because when you met Gary, as you'll know, not small hand, not big in terms of hand, forearm, but so much power. I mean, just and so much explosivity at the arm wrestling table. He was quick. He could hook. He could press. He had that high posting style top roll that he was so powerful in. And recorded wins against, Cleve Dean. I think he's got a win against Richard. At the time when I came into the sport, he was beating John more often than not. He was very, very powerful there. And I remember he came to the Unit 4 gym in London, and we were down there training. And on that day, I mean, he was just immoral, biblically strong, ridiculous. Nobody could do a goddamn thing with him anywhere. You know what I mean? Just obscenely strong. Even with guys like Cobra, who at that time were exceptional. Andreas, Sharon. Gary was a very, very, very strong guy. And 1993 in Canada, the Worlds, utterly dominant. Utterly dominant. Yeah. And then the other time that I remember was the 95 Yukon Jack in New York. And afterwards, on the practice table, just pulling a little bit with Gary and watching him pull other competitors there, top level competitors, Johnny Walker, Brezink, both Brezinks, Lee Holland, Gibbons, strong guys. And the man was just a different planet. Absolutely different planet.
Yeah. It's a shame. Well, I mean, you got to go where the money is, right? And I guess that's what Gary did at some point in his career. He hung up his. He decided he wasn't going to be an arm wrestler anymore, or at least not for a period of time, and went over where they were paying him the big dollars to come and throw down in the ring, and everything from K1 to Pride to the early UFCs. Yeah, it was impressive.
Yeah, hell of an athlete, and a sad day when he walked away from the sport in many ways, because he was the man at that point in time, you know what I mean? So he went from the heart. It's a little bit like Alexei Voda. When Alexei left the sport, he left at a time when he was pretty much the man or thereabouts, you know what I mean? And I feel like the world was robbed of a few great matchups and encounter. Can you imagine Goodrich and Travis?
That would have been fun.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. There'd have been, whichever way you play that, there's going to be a broken heart one way and a broken jaw the other.
That's right.
It's just, you know, that would have been some interesting. But stylistically, in some respects, not dissimilar. In some respects, with the topper, it would have been interesting. Would have been really interesting. You know, in these sort of fantasy dream-up matches. And we're going to go down this road with you in a minute, mate. In terms of sort of all-time Canadian strongmen. We're not interested in strongmen, but we are interested in arm wrestlers. So we're going to go our own version. All-time Canadian super-heavyweight arm wrestlers. Right? All-time. So any Canadian super-heavyweights, and I'm going to let's work this out for in order. All right? To make it a bit more complicated.
Okay, this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah, so, and let's go 5, which is a bit of a bastard, because it's easier if you go, you know, a little longer than that. Yeah. But if we go top 5, right hand of all time at their absolute best in order.
Oh my God. Do you consider Devin Larratt a super heavyweight?
Me personally, I think that you can consider Devin a super heavyweight. Yeah, at times in his career, without a doubt. I watched the man on the scale weighing 277 pounds. That's a super heavyweight, and I've watched that happen with his shoes and pants off. So he's been big at times in his career.
Let's, for argument's sake, and I'm not saying Devin is not maybe the best current Canadian super heavyweight, but if you're going all time, Devin is only really, in the scope of his whole career, he's dipped his toe in the water of super heavyweight division. Mm-hmm. So would he be the guy that would be the top of the food chain in the super heavyweight division? I don't know. Probably. I'm going to say that probably Gary, if you're going on the best version of that guy, Gary has got to be number 1.
So, first pick on the super heavyweight all-time from Canada sheet is Goodrich.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's a fair statement. Right-handed for sure. Where am I going to stick myself in this list? Because I'm definitely top 5, Neil. You know. but
yeah, I'll put you in that list.
Rounding it out, you got to think about at their absolute best. Maybe not the whole body of their work, but the best version of themselves. It's a mixture of Len Houghton, Greg Boyes, Mike Gould, and myself.
The only guy that I thought might have sneaked in there would have been Earl Wilson as well. And I was interested to see whether Earl Wilson came in there or whether, you know. So Len Houghton, who was another guy that I had like on that fringe, Len Houghton or Earl Wilson, the best. Earl. So it's.
Wow, that's a close one.
Greg Boyes. That's a close one. It is a close one. It is a close one. Because Len, how many people have seen Len at his best outside of Canada, really? Because he didn't travel extensively, let's be honest.
Not many. Len is kind of like Richard Lupke's. He was so good at one period and then took 20 years off and then came back, you know. But he's like that anomaly. Like, I'll say, okay, let's be fair here. Gary number 1, Devin number 2. Man, I gotta go Mike Gould, probably number 3 for body of work. At his absolute best. Then Len and then Earl.
And if you can be in that list, where are you going?
Somewhere between 2 and 4. Right-handed? And I think I still got a lot to do yet, but, realistically, right-handed, I think that's, your top 5 list is a very tough one to sort out. It's a very tough one to sort out because these guys at their absolute best sometimes didn't pull each other. Like in 2008, we had Len Houghton and Earl and myself in the class, but Mike wasn't there. In 2004, we had Len and Mike and I in the class, but Earl wasn't there. Like it was, there's always been that kind of 3 or 4 way dance going on. And we never really saw Devin in there because at that time he was sitting around the 200 pound mark.
Yeah.
So it's a really tough one to sort out. Now, if you ask me who the best of all time in Canada is, I have a very clear answer for that.
We're not talking weight class here. We're talking.
It's the best.
Can I take a flying guess at it?
Sure.
Right. Best of all time, any weight from Canada.
Relative to their own weight class and body of work, yeah.
Right. There's a couple of names that I'm thinking about here, but okay. In my personal opinion of best arm wrestler of all time from Canada. Okay, You're going to hate me. Devin Larratt is my opinion. Now, who I think you will say is Dave Hicks.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah, that's who I'm saying, Dave Hicks. Because
Dave Hicks is in a. I've got a conversation there with guys who I rated extremely highly from Canada, extremely highly, and if I'm going top 5 all time from Canada, you're in that list as well, actually, without question. And the 5 for me would be Larratt, Hicks, Goodrich, yourself, and Denny Dupree.
Oh yes, Denny is definitely in. I would have thrown him in there as well. Yeah.
Because when Denny's another guy that for me, in terms of where his ability got to, when he was at his absolute best, and this is just mucking around with Denny, when I believe he was at that peak around the 94 to 97 type era. Bad mother, let me tell you now.
Yeah.
Big
100%.
Shit ton of endurance. Shit ton of endurance. Could pull anywhere. Awkward son of a bitch. Really elastically strong. Just had that and you'd crack him out sideways. You'd think, you're gone. He hasn't gone. He could still reach with his fingers and he'd hang on. You'd be bouncing away on him and then he'd get a bite on you again. Strong man. Very, very, very hard man to defeat from a lot of angles. So, Dupree, the Dragon, was an animal.
Absolutely was.
Animal. And all those guys that he had Magoo at his best was a beast as well.
And then you can throw George in there at some point too.
George is Danny. George is that anomaly. George is that weird, crazy. Right. While we're on here, okay. Call to arms. There's 2 men I want on this show from Canada. Actually, there's 3, but we've already talked about one, and I've extended this to 2 of them. Right. Goodrich, Gary. Read your PMs, brother. I have messaged Gary a couple of times. He might think it's a crack call and I want to show him my dick or something. No, legit. I want you on the show, Gary. Get yourself on the show. So I want Goodrich on the show because I bring that interview to people. Dave Hicks declined to come on the show via
Really?
Marlon. Yeah. And
Wow.
I am gutted because I love Dave Hicks. I'll talk to Dave Hicks for 10 hours non-stop just about fishing.
Yeah. Wow.
Dave Hicks.
Surprised. I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, I'm gutted by that is what I am. And Dave, if you do have a change of heart and you want to come on the show, Dave Hicks, other one. Gary, as I said, and George Zakowicz.
Yeah. If you want to get George or, if you want George on the show, and you want Gary on the show, call Mark Zalepa.
Have you got Mark Zalepa's number?
I sure do, yeah. I'll send it to you later.
After we finish later on, mate, that's got to come over. But back on track, Mother Fluffer. You tell me about Dave Hicks, because you had a very clear answer. It was Hicks. So let's just dig into Hicks a little bit here.
Well, you got to think about a guy that didn't really start arm wrestling until he was around 40 years of age. Mm-hmm. And the amount of World W.A.F medals that he amassed in that time, when he also decided not to arm wrestle in certain parts of those events because he was refereeing, could have been much more substantial. But then there's the Golden Bear tournaments where you hear all these stories about the Crushing Russian getting stuck in his weight class to beat him even though he's significantly heavier, and Hicks just winning anyway. So there's all the legendary stories of Dave. There's watching him compete for many, many, many years, even pulling in masters classes at world levels when he's, just kind of there hanging out and taking home gold medals. I just think that his body of work is so substantial that you can't deny him that number one spot.
No doubt about it, Dave Hicks. For those of you out there that have listened to what Ryan said there and are not familiar with Hicks, please dig out some old footage and watch it. It'll be on YouTube. If it's not, check out. I'm sure Gary Roberts will be posting some stuff. I'm sure Scott may have some stuff. There'll be other archive footage, and you maybe know where some of this stuff is that these guys can see, Ryan. But at his best, Hicks was frightening. Absolutely amazing. So explosive, fast twitch off the charts.
Yeah.
Top roller with a short, compact arm, big hand, strong wrist and hand. Yeah. Explosive as hell. Solid.
And when I went to the early World Championships back at the start of my career, when Dave Hicks walked into a room, and I just knew him as Dave Hicks, like he's just another Canadian guy. But when he walked into the room, the other countries, particularly the Russians, would stop what they're doing and turn like it was a bona fide, almost Jesus-like celebrity walked in. And the aura about him in that room was significant.
And yet, if you meet a more down-to-earth, straight-up, real individual than Dave Hicks, I'd be very surprised.
I would as well.
That guy, what a tremendous bloke. I mean, just the nicest, most humble, lovely, charismatic, talk to anybody all day, humorous guy you could ever... God, I've had some fun with Dave Hicks. I mean, that sounded really dodgy, and I'm not talking like George Michael, gentleman's toilets type fun. I'm talking sat at a bar, talking about fishing, talking about anything. We went to Lixela, in the art. Oh, mate, tell you what, went on a sledge ride with that bugger. Get a few drinks into Dave Hicks. Good times.
I remember he almost derailed my first nationals didn't go very well anyway. But whatever confidence I had going into that, I was this new arm wrestler that had won a couple of local shows, went to the national championships, and Miles Wilco introduces me to Dave Hicks. He says, Dave, why don't you show him a few things? So I get on an armwrestling table with this little wee old guy, and I'm giving him absolutely everything I've got. Everything I can muster in my arm, I'm pulling with him. And he's manipulating my hand and showing me things, and I thought, holy shit, maybe arm wrestling's not for me.
And his left was a rock.
Yeah.
Absolute solid. But yeah, lovely guy. Hicks, we salute you, mate. Get your ass on this show, David Hicks. Get your ass on this show. But yeah, mate, you send me over Mark's number, Zakowicz, Goodrich, You want to get them on here? We do.
Yeah.
And get into some of the history. But it's interesting, mate, that your choice there so let's sort of before we get back onto your own path, and that's what we're here to do. You've sparked my interest in the sort of all-time Canada list. So all-time Canada list, and we're taking George Zakowicz out of this because weirdo.
Yeah.
Okay, he sits with Danny Tesh. He's something else.
Yeah.
We put over there, and we shall not talk about him, even though he's amazing. So, outside of him, give me your all-time 5. No weight class.
No weight class. Well, Earl Wilson's in there. That's one of the most decorated ever in Canada, as far as just WAF medal count. I mean, the man went to a world championship and brought home 3 golds and a silver.
Yeah,
that's a pretty rare accomplishment. I mean, you got to throw Devin in there. Devin leapfrogged all the stuff that most people do, like concentrating on the WAF championships and all that kind of stuff. Devin dipped a toe in the water and then decided to go a different path, but that doesn't mean he doesn't belong on that list. He definitely does.
Oh yeah.
So Devin, Earl, Dave, obviously, and then I'm sitting here wondering about 4 and 5. That's a tough one. I'm going to throw a curveball at you.
Okay.
Maybe Barb Schlegel belongs on that list.
Always difficult.
Yeah.
Always difficult because of the whole depth of talent thing.
Yeah.
You know? It's the politically correct answer and there's the depth of talent thing.
Yeah.
It is hard to... One thing you can unequivocally say is that Barb Schlegel was a dominant female arm wrestler.
Yeah.
No doubt. That is an extremely good arm wrestler. In fact, in many ways, she was ahead of her time in terms of female arm wrestling technical development. I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
At a time when a lot of female arm wrestlers were heavily reliant on one or other style, Barb was extremely well-rounded. She's also a physical freak for her weight class. Huge hands, very disproportionately long lever, but very, very strong. So often you'll put the lever length with more technical and yet not as physically imposing. Barb was physically imposing as hell. I mean,
yes.
Very, very strong woman. Really technically well-rounded. Pull anywhere you want. And talk about grit and determination. God damn, that girl didn't mind a match.
Yeah.
She would get into some sick positions and backwards step. I mean, she's as brave as you want to be. She'll pull anywhere. You know, bone on bone. Yeah, she's in.
Yep.
No problem. Anywhere you want to go. So fabulous, fabulous arm wrestler. Whether I would put her in the very, very best of all time, honestly, I'm struggling to get past the depth of talent thing, knowing who's out there. When you talk about people like Mike Gould on left and right, the depth of talent in that field, even guys like Luke Reamer, bad mother. I mean,
there was a time.
You know.
And it's interesting that in Canada, because the country is so vast, that list is going to change drastically between East and West Coast, who you ask.
Yeah.
It won't even be a close discussion, because you might see Len Houghton being near the top of the list for the people in the West. You might see guys like Stan Relland creeping into that list.
Yeah.
Like it's a huge amount of talent that has come out of Canada over the years, and unless you're an Eric Roussin who has the history on everybody, you know, it's a tough one to pick apart. And there's even guys like that I know are the best arm wrestlers to never win a WAF title. Miles Wolko, for example. He is one of the biggest cases of unrealized potential that has ever come out of Canada. Mm-hmm. I've watched him and listened to him get into the finals of the World Arm Wrestling Championships and talk himself into a silver medal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're trying to rack your brain. So many great arm wrestlers have come out of there who were solid pullers, guys that never get a shout out. Everybody knows the likes of Mike Gould and so on because it is unarguable that the guy who's been there, done that, bought the T-shirt, and every man in every single setting of the sport of arm wrestling, if you don't tip your hat to Mike Gould when he walks into a room, you need to give your head a wobble.
Absolutely. And he's still doing it.
Real,
He's still doing it.
But there's others, isn't there? And Mike Hay, Port Perry, that whole crew was started by Mike Hay. And then you've got guys like Pat Mastrangelo.
I was just going to say that name. Yeah.
Bad mother.
You see them on the Yukon Jack tapes and...
Yeah. Mate, Pat Mastrangelo, Garth Carlson, Strong as Balls, John Roberts, and so many more. Like I say, Dupreel, Magoo, it's Tony Senger.
And if Mike Barrett would have traveled more, what could he have done? If he would have just been more active and traveled the world.
So many great... I mean, we're going to go ladies for a minute, right? We're going to go ladies while we're on the ladies thing. Because Leanne...
Yeah.
In her day... Mate, Leanne was iron at that time. I mean, she beat Doc Jones.
Yeah.
She did. And at her time, Leanne was so dominant in the ladies, it was a joke. There wasn't anybody. I would have loved my sort of dream match up there would have been Vika Gabakova of Russia.
Yeah.
Is that just before your time? Do you remember?
No, I remember Vika was just in the early 2000s, she was just getting towards the end of her career, but she was killing. And that other Russian girl came along that took over.
Well, Vika had issues, like physical issues, injuries and so on, but Vika Gabakova in her day, I don't think, for me, possibly represents the strongest female athlete I've ever encountered, for sheer power. I mean, she was criminally strong.
She toyed with the girls at the W.A.F championships when I saw her. Toyed with them.
Complete joke. Yeah. Just ridiculous. Now, the other name that I'm going to throw you here now is maybe, people don't give her the credit, don't give the respect, but let me tell you now, bad little mother fluffer, Nancy Locke.
Killer. Absolute killer.
Killer.
Yeah, and she is still gonna make some waves in this sport. Like, she is not finished. It seems like she's just making that big comeback because the World Arm Wrestling League, and it's amazing.
Nancy's ace.
Love
Nancy. Like, what a beast.
And her husband's okay too.
Yeah. Eric's like, we're not going to go into North American men. But Nancy Locke. Another top-class Canadian female. So if you're talking ladies, you got to go Leanne. You got to go. I mean, we talked about Barb, Nancy, and there's others. You know what I mean?
There are
Joyce
others,
probably.
Jose is there.
Old Jose, another one. There's more. The point that I'm making here is it's a bloody hard call. If you get into that sort of top Canadians of all time list, that's some rare air.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough one. It's not a clear answer either. So, I mean, you and I are even arguing about who the top one guy is. So, I mean,
yeah. I figure, I've got a bit of a different view on some of that, and I hear people's opinions on it, and I a lot of the opinions based on this, right? And I'm going to piss off a lot of people here. But a lot of the opinions based on, this guy's not the best because if he competed in the W.A.F championships or he competed in and they say, you don't know because you haven't seen that level of competition. Mother Yeah. I've seen every level of competition, okay? There isn't one that I haven't seen. There isn't one I don't know what it smells like. I know the level of competition. And I know Devon Larratt. My answer to that would be, I'm not sure you've ever seen Devon Larratt. To the guys on the internet forums who write some of that stuff, I've been up close and personal and watched Devon do things that were ridiculous.
Yeah.
I've driven back to the airport with John Brezink in my car and had John Brezink say to me, that guy that was arm wrestling in that lobby last night may be as strong as I've ever felt, ever. That was ridiculous. Now, when Brezink says that, you start to listen.
Yeah.
You know, Michael Todd said the same damn thing when we were there that night in the lobby when Devon beat Ron Bath at the Trafford Centre in Manchester. I still maintain may have represented the best Devon Larratt that's ever been. That guy that night was ill.
I would not say anything too strongly against your pick, because I don't think we're far off, and a good case could be made for both. And if it was an official list that was published, I don't think I could argue with it very much.
It's very, very hard, and there's points for, like you say, Gary. Did we ever see the best of Gary? Really?
Possibly not. And then we have, the argument that Devon didn't go to W.A.F and all that stuff. I mean, he did go to W.A.F. The only reason he didn't win a W.A.F title in 1999 is because Ron Bath and John Brezink decided to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and now, Ron Bath did go to W.A.F and did win world titles, okay?
Yes.
And with all due respect to Ron, who's a very good personal friend of mine, Ron did that when he wasn't Ron Bath. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Yeah. But that wasn't the best Ron Bath has ever been, let me tell you now. There's been a lot stronger versions of Ron Bath. And when the versions of Ron Bath that I'm talking about, they could win W.A.F titles comfortably.
Here's something that might illustrate this a little bit better. And this is, I'm just going to say it. You took Levan Saginashvili, that won the World Championship in 2018, and you throw him in that shape into the top 8 or the World Arm Wrestling League, he is not very competitive.
Yeah, I would
as
agree
the
with that.
W.A.F champion.
At that time.
At that time.
Okay, so there's a very different argument for me, a very different argument in the weight classes at the W.A.F on certain years. For a lot of the W.A.F's time, you can make a call on the weight class at the time on any given year. 1 year, iron. Next year, not as iron. Next year, iron. Next year, not as... and you've got to chart it. That's why I would always be more proud of the fact that you were at a level for a period of time than necessary individual victories. You know what I mean? And I think with all arm wrestlers at an elite level, it's very difficult for anyone to stay at that level for that long. And I'm not talking just because, you might say, oh, well, they can't stay on a cycle that long. Or, let's not be cynical or negative.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with that. I'm talking about if you were training at that level and pursuing something at that level, regardless of any other distraction, it's difficult to stay injury-free that long.
Absolutely it is.
When you're chasing and peaking that hard. You only need to look at people like Engin, Gaszewski, Andreas Rundstrom, guys that have done very well in various weight classes. All of them have got that tale of woe where they've torn something, damaged something, which has set them back significantly. And I think it's probably pretty consistent throughout the sport or throughout any strength or combat sport. You take that damage, It's hard to avoid. Anyway, I just want to get back on point a little bit, just before, so at least we've got a point of reference when we go into show 3, mate, because we've talked for nearly half an hour, nearly 40 minutes.
And we haven't even got into this stuff.
I told you. We've not even moved forward. But this is the kind of thing I expected to happen with you, Ryan, to be honest, mate, because you've got such an extensive knowledge of the sport. But just as a sort of precursor for show number 3, At what point did you what age and what year represented the turning point for you in terms of, okay, arm wrestling is my game, this is the sport, and what sort of clarified or crystallized that view in your mind?
Well, it's happened a few times, so it's always been there. 1997, I started arm wrestling. By early 2000s, I was having good success in arm wrestling. There's been periods of time when I've kind of drifted away from it, just a little bit. So in 2004, or even right at the start, and then in 2004, I was doing some strongman. Around 2005, 2006, I was doing some more powerlifting. I was doing that kind of thing, kind of drifting away. And then at some point, I decided,
did you pull at all, or did you?
I was still pulling.
So you were arm wrestling.
I was arm wrestling, but I wasn't like focused on arm wrestling.
Yeah.
And then at some point, I drift away again to decide to lose 130 pounds and do that thing. And then compete at a lower weight class in arm wrestling still. Realize that this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. And then what really solidified me wanting to just get right back to arm wrestling and stick with the one thing, probably that decision didn't come around until around 2016. So after all these years, the time that it took for me to actually say, okay, this is the one thing I'm going to do, and there's no more messing around, no more bullshit. It's just going to be one sport, probably 2016. When I started to put some weight back on, started to get strong again at arm wrestling, 2013 was an eye-opener for me because I didn't even place on the right hand at the Canadian Nationals in the 242 class. I won the left. I won the left, but the UAL comes along, starts offering up huge prizes. And then they're eclipsed by the World Arm Wrestling League that's offering up huge cash prizes.
Yeah. And
not only that, but, you know, I'm starting to train some guys. They're having some success. It's, why am I always chasing something? It's almost like I had to figure something out psychologically in my own head. Why am I always looking for something else? The next challenge. When the challenge is right here. So, even though you win a W.A.F title, there are so many other challenges out there to tackle.
I want to just get a statement, a quote, a point in time. If you look fairly back on your career in which you've accomplished a tremendous amount with the World Arm Wrestling Federation titles and so on, all the Canadian national titles, and you've very much established yourself as a mainstay super heavyweight globally, you know, and someone to be taken very seriously. Despite all that acceptance that you're formidable in the class, have we seen, in your mind, your best yet?
Not even close. Not even close. And you mean from me personally?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not even a chance that we have seen that. Because there are things that I haven't even touched as far as getting ready and preparing and training for events. It's always been under my own knowledge base. It's never been outside of that. It's just, I want to blow some minds because I'm sick of hearing people say to me, when I have a match maybe coming up, say World Arm Wrestling League, oh, is it a left-handed or a right-handed match? What I am hearing from you is, you think that it's great if I'm pulling that guy left-handed, but you don't think I can do anything with my right hand. And that's what it kind of comes across as to me sometimes. I hear that. Is it a left-handed match? I can pull with my right. You gotta.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there are certain things that I need to explore in order to move my career down the path. And I don't want to be the guy that's just the gatekeeper for the World Arm Wrestling League. I want to actually be the guy that's making some waves. And I set a lofty, lofty goal to myself. That at some point, now this is provided we aren't going to be sitting here waiting for a season to start because of a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But provided a season does start in 2021, I want to do everything. My goal, and I realize it's not my decision and it's not completely under my control, but a hammer match in 2021 I think is within my reach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course it is. Yeah, certainly.
And that's at least a few matches away. So
Great.
I need to win. I need to win convincingly.
An interestingly comment from Jerry Caderet after you pulled him, that he said that you felt ridiculously strong in that match, and yet you're telling us here that you've got a lot of growing room and potential left to see. It gives us a great place to sort of leave this second episode, mate, knowing that we're going to come back in with a lot more to sort of dig into. And we want to explore sort of the career path and maybe understand a little bit why you weren't as committed or haven't been as committed to the sport of arm wrestling. And also try to get an understanding of where you think you can go, just how far. I want to understand what you haven't touched, the things that you haven't done yet, and where that can take you. So, a lot of miles to cover, ladies and gentlemen, with Ryan Espey. That wraps up this second episode with Big Ryan. Remember, if you've got questions that you want us to put to Ryan, no holds barred. Like the way this guy used to fight, send them in. Put them in the comments section so Ryan can see them. PM them to Ryan himself if you like. We've got a lot of ground to cover still, ladies and gentlemen. If this is your first visit to Supernatural Strength, let everybody know about it. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you back here very, very soon. Until that time, take it easy, peeps.